This stuff's been around since the 70s. How many people do you know have gone to the hospital because of protein powder? Like none. I know nobody, and I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I don't know anybody. I've been taking them since I was 21. This is 29 years. You know, I was 2 protein shakes a day for decades, right? Like, I'm still here, doing okay, because how in the world would that make any sense if you're a 110-pound lady or you're a 380-pound dude? That 30 grams is some magical number. Makes no sense. Most people aren't going to hit their protein intake just off of whole foods. You can, and maybe, you know, in the ideal world, you should. You're going to be better off getting enough protein. So shakes are fine. Pick a quality, reputable brand, and don't compromise on that aspect of your supplementation. Make sure you get a good quality protein powder that you're using. They are not only safe, but hugely beneficial in the maintenance and building of muscle tissue, which is one of the most important factors in your fitness, health, and longevity throughout your life. All right. Let's see what we got going on today. How y'all doing out there? It doesn't look like that camera's pointed at me. Episode 28, protein powders. How basic can we get? Yeah, I was gonna say I'm just kidding, but I'm serious. It's pretty basic stuff, and you know, that's cool. Let's get into some of that stuff, and maybe add some other stuff along with it, if you know what I mean. Camera adjustment there. Episode 28 recorded on 4/8/25. Protein powders. All systems go. Goal of this episode is rid the world. I decided to get like, you know, all big picture, you know. Rid the world of protein powder fear and ignorance. That's the goal for today. What to look for in a powder, we'll cover that as well. And as always, we're going to have some fun because you ain't having fun, you're doing it wrong. Before we get into updates, I'd like to thank myself for sponsoring Liquid Death. Liquid Death always quenches my thirst during an episode. Maybe it should quench yours through. You know, murders my thirst. I'm sorry, Liquid Death. Liquid Death always murders my thirst during an episode. I need that. Oh, that's good. It is smooth water. I've been talking a lot today. Talked for about an hour straight, and my voice is a little tired, but we're going to get it done. All right, outline of topic for today. We got updates. We've got before we get started. I'm going to get into some stuff before we get started. Going to spend some time on that, it looks like. We got an AI overview. I don't remember what it's about. Bioavailability and kind. So we're going to talk about what bioavailability is. That's a big word. And then the kinds of protein powders that exist. What to look for in a protein powder. When or timing, which I updated to timing. I don't remember. I'll see it when I get there. And then we'll have a final thought again. Not a lot of final thoughts. I don't think you can have very heavy, in-depth final thoughts on protein powders. But I came up with one. I did come up with one. All right, updates. My little bullet point here says Gators. If you've been following March Madness in the NCAA Men's Basketball National Championship, then you know that the Florida Gators won. And maybe you're excited about that. I know somebody who was betting on the Gators. Congrats to you. All right. I was actually watching the game, and it was so late. It was 10:30. I'm like, what am I doing? This is too much stress. I kind of wanted Florida to win because they look like the Pistons. You know, their gear looked like the Pistons, and maybe that's why. But with 5 minutes left, I turned the game off because I thought they were going to lose. I'm like, I'm not watching this. They're going to lose. I'm going to have to go to bed upset about it. How silly is that? At one point, I was watching sports, and I actually had the capacity to just enjoy the game and not care about the outcome. And that would have been a great game to watch for that, but I didn't. I wanted the team to win, and it always brings emotion into it. Anyways, go Gators. Golf, nothing to say there. I watched it while I ate a salad, and it was whatever. Weather is rain. No, we haven't had much rain. It's been consistently warmer. No, not really. It's been 30, but the sun is back, and we got warm weather coming, which means I'm going to be getting outside and riding my bike. Excited about that. Subscriber update. What's this phone doing here? Subscriber update. None. No, just kidding. Email 62. YouTube went from 110 to 113. Straight on the creep. Trade, we made changes there. I had a YouTube manager. Guy was doing a fine job, but, it was just taking more time. I think I mentioned this before. Like, it's surprising. Say, I realize this, especially with coaching. Like, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to start working out, right? That's one thing. I'm going to start working out. But there's 20 to 30 things that one decision is going to influence. And so when I said, hey, we're going to have a YouTube manager to just focus on growing YouTube, well, that's a one thing. Where that one thing was having me do literally 10 to 15 or 20 tasks every week, whether it was going in and check, getting reviewed. He would send me the thing. I would review it, the thumbnail, the description. I'd probably go in there and make some slight edits. It was just back and forth. There was a lot of stuff. And I'm focused on growing the gym right now and maintaining the podcast. And so as long as I'm getting an episode out, I'm good with that. I don't really care if it's growing. So what we're going to do with the YouTube is they're going to get uploaded by Nathan, the editor. He's just going to throw them right up there, and I'm going to throw a quick description in there, and that's going to be the end of it, and we'll see what happens. Spotify, same. Apple, same. Reminder, please submit your questions to dennis@dennisfenrich.com or reply to the email. And a little update, if some people thought I wasn't putting out an episode every week because they didn't get the email. What happens is on the back end, I can see if the email got opened, and I can see if any of the links were clicked on within the email. Man, I was talking a lot today. I'm gonna be all over this liquid death. I'm feeling the back of my throat. It's getting raspy. And they weren't getting clicked. So I started to assume that people weren't even looking at the emails. Like, they weren't getting any value out of the email. But what was happening was people were saying, oh, there's an episode. And then at some point during the day or the next day, they were going into their Spotify or their Apple Cast, or is that what it's called? Applecast, Apple Podcast, whatever, or going to the YouTube. They weren't clicking on it right from then, which makes sense. So I had like 5 people tell me, hey, where's the emails been? And so anyways, I'm back on the emails. It's another task. I got rid of some tasks, and now I got to do another task. It's surprisingly enough, it takes 10, 15 minutes to get that email up and out. This is a much bigger ordeal than I had anticipated. Anyways. Murder my thirst. So that's it for updates. I will be getting those emails out again because you guys like them. All right, so let's get into this. Before we get started, now I had in parentheses on my soapbox, because I'm going to get in a bit of a soapbox on this, because why not? It's fun to go on rants. So you'll hear these different things. I just want to address some of these things that you hear about protein powder, or you hear about protein in general. I just want to address some of them, okay? So whole foods are best. People will say that. They'll be like, whole foods are the best, man. Protein powders, man. Nobody knows if they're good for you or not. Okay. Just because there's not been a random controlled study on it doesn't mean we don't know if protein powders are good for you or not, all right? I've been taking them since I was 21. This is 29 years. I was 2 protein shakes a day for a decade, right? Like, I'm still here, doing okay, in my opinion. So, anyways, whole foods are best. Okay, yeah, fine. Whole foods are probably best. But, realistically, most people aren't going to hit their protein intake just off of whole foods. You can, and maybe, in the ideal world, you should, but if getting enough protein means getting a protein shake as opposed to not getting enough protein, you're going to be better off getting enough protein. So shakes are fine. Pick a quality, reputable brand and don't compromise on that aspect of your supplementation. Like, make sure you get a good quality protein powder that you're using. Getting enough protein is better than not. Oh, I already made that point. And then, look, I got guts on here. What do I want to say about guts? If the protein you're drinking, if the shake you're drinking is causing some intestinal disruption, then you should find another one. I think that goes without saying. We've covered this before. Excuse me, man. I had a salad. You know what I had? I had a salad, I had sushi, and I had a little bag of chips, okay? So all that in a bag of chips. So anyways, fired up. Too fired up right now. If it's disrupting your guts, one, see what you're putting it in, because I would just kind of tolerate it for years because I'm like, all right, well, getting enough protein is going to be a net benefit over a little bit of intestinal disruption. That was kind of my thinking on it. And then I realized, maybe it's not the powder, maybe it's what I'm putting it in, because I would always put it in some sort of milk substitute, almond milk, cashew milk, macadamia nut milk. Just kidding on that one. But it was some sort of milk substitute, and maybe that was the issue. And I dropped it, and sure enough, that was the issue. Go figure. And I've been fine with that, the whey protein that I take now for years, ever since dropping those. I dropped the milk substitutes like 3 or 4 years ago now. They're tasty, and the shake is better with them, but it's not worth the intestinal disruption. Okay, so that's like the whole protein powder thing. But then you got to deal with this underlying issue of, I call it protein fear mongering, because there's been a lot of that going on, right? It was basically started, I looked this up. Well, where it stemmed from was they were testing protein intake on people with kidney disease, right? So started kind of in the 20s, kind of picked up pace, picked up speed in the 1960s. And what they were doing is they were literally increasing protein intake on people that were in kidney failure or kidney disease on kidney dialysis, and noticing that it was taxing the kidneys. And so that's why I might say this if you're a little older and you go, yeah, I remember that, too much protein's bad for your kidneys. Well, I suppose if it's disease and it's already massively compromised, then yeah, that could be a problem. But when they ran the same studies on people with healthy kidneys, there was no problems whatsoever. Okay. Even one of the studies they took, now these were these were healthy early 20s males. They tripled their protein intake. So basically took their body weight, which 180, 200, and they ate triple that every day for 6 months. And I couldn't find a study. And there was no problem. So maybe I shouldn't bring it up because I can't cite the study. But it happened. Maybe you can find it. So kidney disease, subjects to dialysis, blah, 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 blah. The other thing, so there was that, right? Oh, it's going to break your kidneys. Potentially. But no. Unless you're compromised. The second one is, high protein causes cancer, right? Everybody knows that. And that was based off of a thing called mTOR, okay? And that's basically the mechanism that triggers anabolism. That is the pathway for taking nutrients coming in and using those nutrients to create anabolism or tissue growth. And so since cancer is, kind of runaway cells that aren't they're not even part of your body anymore. It's kind of this anomaly of the DNA is the same, but it's mutated in a way that now it doesn't listen to the signals from the rest of their body, right? And so it just kind of continues to generate its own tissue until it causes so many problems that you can no longer exist. And so that is an mTOR thing. That is what's happening inside those cells. mTOR is running rampant. Okay, so the conclusion was, if you're triggering your mTOR, you're going to increase your risk of cancer, which is a very silly way to look at it and oversimplified, because, if you just look at exercise is, I think it was like a 3 times, it would multiply mTOR activity 3 times as much as protein intake would. So does exercise cause cancer? No. Then why are we assuming, because we're turning on an mTOR, which you got to have, by the way, because if you're not producing new tissue, then you're definitely going to die. If your cells aren't regenerated, that's a problem. So anyways, mTOR, cancer, no. Okay. It's been shown, no. And what is the other? Oh, and the other thing you hear all the time is, and this isn't cancer and protein. This is not, people, hey, supplements are not regulated by the FDA. And I'm not going to speak disparagingly about the FDA. I don't think you need to demonize an agency to show that, I don't want to say it's incompetent. Like, I don't have to, it's not all bad. There's a lot of good people there that are trying to do good things. There's some people there that aren't so good, that aren't doing good things. But overall, they've got a tough job to do. And, let's give them a little bit of leeway. But I'm glad that supplements aren't regulated by the FDA, because if they were, you'd never get another one, because it's going to be you're going to have a really hard time getting enough money, because it takes on average 10 years for a drug to get approved through the process, right? So I'm a pharmaceutical company. I've got a new drug. It's going to be 10 years of testing, 10 years of studies, 10 years of trial and error to get this thing to market, right? And so if you're going to have, a vitamin or some sort of plant compound, there's never going to be funding to get it through that process. So the process that we do have is, hey, look, most people aren't evil. They realize, if I'm going to start a supplement company, if I'm killing people right off the bat, I'm probably not going to have a lot of success. So the supplements are coming out of people who actually want to have an impact. And maybe there's going to be some shenanigans going on there that we're putting out some bunk stuff. But overall, the process is faster, and the FDA actually does regulate it to some degree, because if they do find a supplement company that's putting out crap and hurting people, they're going to go raid them and shut them down, okay? Because that's what they do. It's just not a proactive approach. It's more of a reactive. And I think for supplements, that's a better way to do it. We really don't want the FDA coming in and saying, you need to go through 10 years of testing before we even allow you to take a product to market. Because again, we're not going to get into supplements if that's the case. And think of all the great products that have come, think of all the great supplements that have come out, like all the stuff with mushrooms, creatine, B vitamin supplementation. There's different plant compounds that can have an impact. There's so much good stuff that has come out of the supplement industry. The process is running great. That's my opinion on it, and that's how I think about it. So bam, part of the soapbox. I got some really negative stuff in the FDA here, which I'm not going to say. All right. Maybe I'll come back to it if I'm feeling frisky. Okay, moving on. Now, I did a little AI overview. You know what time it is. It's time to see if we're recording, which we are. I did a little AI overview, and I forgot what I was going to ask the guy. Oh my God. Anyways, I'll just read what it says. While protein powder can be a convenient way to boost your protein intake, it's generally not necessary for most people and should be used as a supplement, not a replacement for whole foods, and consumed in moderation. I put this on here because I thought the AI was just dumb on this. I really was just like, what are you even talking about? And you can see, like I just talked about protein fear-mongering. You can see in the wording here, it's like, it's really trying to deter people from protein powders, unless it's a plant-based protein powder, which, you got to keep in mind, this is just, AI is just large language models. It's taken in billions of words from, I guess AI, Google's doing it from the internet, and getting a consensus. And right now, the consensus is still, hey, be careful with protein, and, watch out for those supplement companies, and unless it's plant-based, then it's going to be totally fine. So you'll see that as I read these, or you'll hear it. You'll hear it. All right, so that was the first one. Listen to the underlying tone of this, right? If you were a noob to fitness and you heard, my coach said, protein powder. Well, I'm going to go to the Google AI. I'm going to search that, and I'm going to see what it says. This is what they're going to get. I'll read the first line again. While protein powder can be a convenient way to boost your protein intake, it's generally not necessary for most people and should be used as a supplement, not a replacement for whole foods, and consumed in moderation. So it's generally not necessary. No, it generally is necessary, because generally speaking, most people aren't going to get enough protein in. So that's wrong. And then what was the other one? something about moderation. And anytime you're talking about moderation, it's implying that, there's an inherent danger, right? That used in moderation. Like you never think about like we say that about alcohol because, we know really bad things happen when you have too much alcohol, right? But saying that about a protein powder, like this stuff's been around since the 70s. And like, how many people do you know have been gone to the hospital because of protein powder? Like none. I know nobody, and I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I don't know anybody. Anyways. Next line from the Google AI. When protein powder can be helpful. So again, there was actually a few lines about it being helpful, which was fun. You know what? So interesting. I read that the first time. I didn't even think about it, that I couldn't see it. And I read it the second time, and I noticed I couldn't see it, and I had a hard time reading it. Back to the glasses. Meeting protein needs. If you're struggling to get enough protein from your diet, especially if you're an athlete, vegetarian, vegan, or have specific dietary needs, protein powder can be a helpful tool. Yes, agreed. Things to consider. Not a necessity. Most people can get enough protein from a balanced diet consisting of whole foods like meat, fish, dairy, eggs, nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes. Wrong. Most people cannot do that. They could, but they don't, right? I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying that from my experience of working with people in exercise and nutrition for 25 years, they can't do it, right? They're just not. It's a lot of work to cook and eat all that food. You know what easy it is to take in 40 grams of protein and something that tastes good? Like, way easier. And it's just, again, it's trying to steer people away from protein. I don't know why. Protein powders and supplements. It's ridiculous. Moderation is key, semicolon, or colon. While protein powder is generally safe. Now, what in the world does that mean? Generally safe. There it is. What was I harping on before? Consumed in moderation. Generally safe. Like, what do you mean generally safe? Again, does anybody know anybody that's died from protein powder? No. Okay, I didn't read it earlier. I'm going to read it now. It's a well-documented fact that adverse prescription drug effects and other medical errors are the third leading cause of death in America. Adverse drug events harm 2.7 million hospitalized patients in the U.S. annually, with over 106,000 deaths, and that's just from hospitalized patients. So if you're in the hospital, 2.7 million people were injured from an adverse drug event, and 106,000 died. That's April 7th, 2022. Now, when you go, but nobody's died from protein powder. Like, do you get what I'm saying here? Hopefully you're getting what I'm saying. I'm just so tired of this protein fear-mongering. Moderation is key. While protein powder is generally safe, excessive intake can lead to digestive issues and may strain the kidneys. What? Show me the study that showed that. Now, what are people doing? They're going to drink 300 grams of protein a day? Probably not. Most people are going to have a shake or two a day, okay? They're not anywhere near where the kidney strain would be even potentially considered. And they had a group of males in their 20s do triple their body weight in protein intake, and they didn't see anything there. There was no adverse effects on the kidneys in that study. I'll find a study, and I'm going to get it to you next week. Also, things to consider from the Google AI. Choose wisely, Be mindful of added sugars, artificial sweeteners, and potential contaminants like heavy metals in some protein powders. Okay. So tell me, now I know where this comes from. Be mindful of added sugars and artificial sweeteners. As if those are more dangerous than drug interactions. They're not. But anyways, the heavy metal thing, there was I don't remember, I'm pretty sure it was a whey protein, but there was a company out of China. They were finding heavy metals, and I think this was a really well-known company. Well, let me back that up. If you don't know, most companies that you are getting your supplements from aren't producing whey protein or protein powder. What they're doing is they're going to a big, large manufacturer, they're buying it in bulk, and they are then putting it into a container and putting a label on it, okay? Most companies aren't going to go build a whey protein filtering factory to make whey protein when they could just, there's already one that's built and these people are selling it really cheap and they can just do it that way. That's how it's done. So what happened was, I think this might have been muscle milk, but people were getting sick from their product and they found heavy metals in the protein powder. And that was traced to a company in China that was making the whey protein. And inside the kiln, I think that's what it's called, where the protein was being dried out, it was so old that the parts of the kiln were falling into the powder. Crazy. But one time, and now every protein powder out there, like, you got to be worried about heavy metals. Give me a break. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's my take on it. Under things to consider, consider the source. Some protein powders are derived from cow's milk, hemp, or PEA. not urine. It may be stripped of most micronutrients, fiber, fat, and carbohydrates. Okay, barring the pea joke, it's like, consider the source. Some protein powders are derived from cow's milk, hemp, or pea. It may be stripped of most micronutrients, fiber, fat, and carbohydrates. Well, no kidding. It's a protein powder. It's supposed to not have those things in there. All right, last one, and we're going to get into some education here. Listen to your body. If you experience digestive issues or other side effects, reduce your intake or switch to a different brand. And I agree 100% on that. Okay. Man, my throat is tired. That's so good. Putting in work for you guys. Okay, so let's talk about bioavailability. Let's talk about bioavailability and kinds. Protein bioavailability is a measure of how efficiently your body can digest, absorb, and utilize amino acids from a protein source. This is large print. That's what it is. So you're going to eat this protein. How much are you actually able to process and absorb and utilize inside your body? So that's a measure, bioavailability, and it gets a marker on it, right? So they take a whey protein or they take an egg protein or whatever, and they measure its bioavailability, and that is a measure of how efficiently or how much of that protein you're actually taking in, okay? A protein source with high bioavailability means a larger portion of the protein's amino acids are available for your body to use for building, repairing tissue, producing enzymes and hormones, and other essential functions. So that's bioavailability again. Okay, so there's only a handful of sources of protein powder. And after this, we're going to basically talk about whey protein because that is pretty much what everybody uses. But there are a handful of other ones. You can get whey protein, casein is the other side of the milk protein. So whey protein comes from milk. And so they actually used to throw it out. You know, when they're making cottage cheese, the curds in the whey, they keep the curds and they threw out the whey for centuries. Nobody just threw it out, which is crazy. One day, somebody in one of those factories, like, you know, he must have been a biologist or scientist or somebody who's doing testing. He's like, I wonder what's in this. And lo and behold, the best protein powder on the planet became available to everybody, and health went up just because of a question. Anyways, whey concentrate. So casein. There's also egg, which you could just eat, but powder form would be easier. And then you got pea, soy, and hemp. That's PEA. And then two actually didn't show up on this list, which was collagen and beef. You know, they figured out a way to kind of melt beef. I don't know how they did that, but so you can get beef protein powder, but it's not. Again, if you ever look at the testing and the bioavailability and the other stuff with whey, it's just a superior form of protein. It's definitely an advantage to be using protein powder called whey. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so what to look for in a protein powder, all right? And this breaks down into three simple categories. You got the source, you've got how is it processed, and then you've got the ingredients, the extra ingredients in there. And that's all I ever think about when I'm looking at a supplement. Where is it sourced from? What? Kind of can't even think of it right now. How is it processed? Where is it sourced? How is it processed? And what other things are coming in that product, right? So for source, like I just said, everybody's pretty much going with whey protein. And King Whey's been here for 20 years now. It's just superior. All right, so sources again, whey, egg, pea, etc. If plant, ensure there are two sources. So if you're going to do a plant protein powder, fine, I support that. but it shouldn't be a pea only or a rice only or a hemp only. I think a hemp is actually more complete. No, maybe not. It's going to need to be from 2 different plant sources. So you usually see a blend, like it'll be pea and rice or something like that. Because in order to complete, most plants do not have a whole protein that is available for humans. They're going to have certain amount of, because there needs to be the different amino acids. There needs to be, I think it's nine essential amino acids need to come together for the body to be able to take that and turn it into a complete protein in the body. Rice doesn't have all those amino acids. Pea doesn't have all those amino acids. You want to mix those things together to get the full spectrum of amino acids, okay? So go plant, just make sure that it's got a blend. You'll see a lot of protein powders talk about organic, that is organically sourced or it came from grass-fed cows. Now, does that change anything? If you're looking from a moral standpoint and you want cows that were treated well, then yes, it's going to be different for you. If you're looking for a health perspective and are you getting things in that powder that a conventionally raised cow's milk would have versus something an organic grass-fed cow, it's really debatable because if during the process of filtering out and removing things to get it concentrated down to a protein, that stuff's getting removed, right? Like it's not really getting through that process because they're condensing it down into a protein powder, right? They're trying to get all the other stuff out of it other than the proteins and the amino acids. So I don't think it's going to matter if your protein powder is coming from grass-fed cows or not. Now, people will market that. Maybe they add a little bit more cost because they'd have to because they'd be getting a more expensive source of milk. Now, if you're just drinking straight milk, yeah, I would say definitely get that from a cow that's been grass-fed. I would not drink conventionally. I probably still would. I still think it's going to be pretty clean. But anyways, hopefully you get where I'm trying to go with that, right? Like, I'm not 100% sure that your organic whey protein is going to be better than the other whey protein that's not organic, or then it's going to cost more. Okay, processing. Now, basically, since we're going to talk about whey here, what happens is they do the curds in the whey, they get that whole thing going, and it gets separated out, and that comes out, and that's whey protein concentrate. Now, different food manufacturers will use whey protein concentrate as it is in the foods that they're making. But if you're going to use it as a powder, it's going to go through another processing. It's going to go through more processing to filter out some more of the stuff, okay? So you're either going to have isolate or a cross-flow microfiltered. Now, either one are going to be good. You'll hear there's an ion exchange whey protein isolate, and I believe even the cross-flow microfiltered is another form of isolate. But you'll hear a lot of people bashing. People will bash the ion exchange, and they're gonna cite two things. They're gonna say, well, the ion exchange removes the immunoglobulins, which is these beneficial compounds that are going to boost your immune system. Now, nobody can say how much they're boosting your immune system, if they're actually having any impact at all. As far as I know, nobody's tested that. I haven't seen it anywhere. And the other thing they'll say is that some of the protein gets denatured. I was not unable to find numbers on the denaturing and how much the percentage of it is. So those are kind of the two things that people will say if they're going to speak negatively about the ion exchange. They'll also say that it's a chemical process and those chemicals can get left in the whey. I, again, couldn't find anything showing how much of that was actually happening. It's just people are speculating, or it's such a small amount that it doesn't have any impact. Again, you just got to be leery. People take small things and make them out to be huge when the most important thing is going to be getting in enough protein, right? That it's going to serve its purpose. But again, it gets turned into a concentrate from the curds and whey, and then it's going to get through some sort of filtering process again after that. You definitely don't want to have a whey protein powder concentrate, in my opinion. You're going to want to take that through a secondary process or some form of isolate, crossflow microfiltered, something along those lines. And that most likely is going to be on the label. Okay, so again, you got your source, you got your processing, and then you got your ingredients. And so, generally speaking, less is more, right? So, the less ingredients you see on that list, the better off it's going to be, right? So, if you can have that short list, that's probably what I would go for. Now, I don't think none isn't necessary. Like, just whey protein isolate by itself, because you're a purist. You can do that if you want. I went down that road for a little bit. Tastes like crap. And if it tastes like crap, it's going to be a strong deterrent against trying to eat it, right? Or drink it. So trying to find a balance in there, it's going to come down to personal. It's going to be a thing that you need to figure out for yourself. But if you're a purist, then you're going to want to have nothing but pure whey protein isolate. You're going to be rocking. Me, I'm going to find a little balance there. Because like I said before, you got old ladies walking around that put dye in their hair for 60 years and they're still good to go. So I'm not super afraid of chemicals. I think our body's fairly tolerant to some of this stuff. Now, yours might not be. You might be more sensitive to things like that. So it's something you got to take into consideration. All right. So that's it for what to look for. We're assessing a powder. Protein timing, right? Like, man, I got to get these window of gains, right? That used to be a big thing. That 45-minute window after a workout was critical. Everybody was trying to get their shake in after that. Turns out that doesn't really matter that much. Talk about it in a second. After I murder my thirst. So the window of gains, there's actually some pretty good studies on this. And turns out that if you're new to training, that window of gains is pretty real, right? You're going to have a larger impact on protein synthesis and carbohydrate uptake into the cell within that 45-minute window. But after about 6 months, it seems like that kind of slows down, and there doesn't seem to be any difference between 45 minutes or 2 hours or 4 hours, right? So window of gains, bit of an illusion. If you are trying to put on muscle and you're trying to kind of gain some mass there, then it would probably be ideal to, first thing in the morning after waking up, getting in a good dose of protein to stop catabolism if you're trying to build, all right? Those would be the two reasons that, getting in protein and the timing of it would be pretty important. Now, other than that, it doesn't really matter too much, right? It's more about getting in enough. Your physiology's been around for a long, long time, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years, and it knows what to do when protein's coming in. So, if you could spread it out, if you could get in, say you're a 180-pound dude like me, that means you got to hit about 180 grams of protein a day if you're training 3, 4, 5 days a week. And so therefore, that's about 45 grams of protein at a crack. You'd probably want to spread that out a little bit. But again, if you got 60 or 70 at one and then 30 at another and kind of made it work throughout the day, then I think you're going to be good to go. Okay. Total seems to be the much more important factor there. There was a myth that went around for a long, long time. I thought it, but it's hogwash, as I have on here. What's a good button for hogwash? Nope. Rim shot. Go Gators, rim shot. Hogwash. Why is it hogwash? All right, so I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with this. Hey, you can't digest more than 30 grams of protein at a time, man. So if you take in 40 grams on your shake, you're just going to pee it out. Well, that's not true. Where that came from was they were doing some studies and they wanted to see what was the most effective dose to trigger anabolism. Okay. So, and what they found was up above anything over roughly 25, 30 grams, there wasn't any more increase in anabolism. It just kind of came up and flattened out, and you took in more protein, but there wasn't a subsequent increase in the amount of tissue that was being generated. So that led to the assumption that, 30 grams is all you can process and digest. But you have to keep in mind that there's two sides to this coin. There's anabolism and there's catabolism. Like, if you're not familiar with that, there's an episode on it, a couple episodes on it, but you're you have this global anabolism or this global catabolism. You're either building tissue or you're breaking it down, right? Now, you can be building in some areas and breaking down in others. That's always going on. But we want to create a net anabolistic effect, and that's going to happen at about 30 grams. But that doesn't mean we can't still influence catabolism. And that's what somebody later on decided to do. It was like, well, maybe there's something else going on. And sure enough, anabolism goes up to about 30 grams. But if you increase to 40, 50, 60, it was dose dependent up until a point, catabolism slows down. So you're actually breaking down less tissue with the more protein that you take in. So you're going to increase anabolism, tissue building, and you're going to slow down and reduce catabolism, tissue breaking down. So you can break down more than 30 grams of protein at a crack. Go figure, because how in the world would that make any sense if you're a 110-pound lady or you're a 380-pound dude? That 30 grams is some magical number. Makes no sense. Okay, so that 30-pound, that 380-pound dude, the mountain, I heard he was 6'8", 380 or something like that. That dude would have to be eating 30 grams of protein every hour for his entire life. But he's not doing that. He can eat 120, 150 at a crack to hit his numbers. So 30 grams is what? Hogwash. Yeah. Okay. Another thing that kind of goes along with timing, amino acids. A lot of people, oh man, got to get my aminos in. Just right off the rip, if you're taking in enough protein, total protein, amino acids probably aren't going to have much of an impact. You're already at an adequate amount to maintain your nitrogen levels, to maintain healthy anabolism and reduce or lower or have a better control of your catabolism. Okay, so again, if you're eating enough protein, amino acids probably aren't going to have a big impact. Is that all I want to say on that? I got BCCAs on here, and that was branch-chained amino acids. BCAAs, branch-chained amino, BCAAs, that's what it is. Man, Dennis, I used to be really big into supplements, and I realized they're just not having as big of an impact as we'd like, and I kind of got disinterested. But they do have a place. So anyways, the amino acid thing got kicked off with BCAAs because they found that there was 3, 4, depending on who you're talking to, amino acids that really trigger an anabolism. And so people started taking them. But again, one thing they figured out was, it's probably not good to trigger anabolism without all the amino acids needed to make a protein. That's common sense. But then they also figured out, if somebody's getting enough protein, amino acids do not have much of an impact. And that's it for protein timing. All right, here we go. Final thoughts. More applause for that. Big celebration. I still take protein shakes. Like I said, I've been, just for the protein fear mongering, I've been taking in body weight or more protein since I was 21 years old, and I will be 50 this month, and I'm still here. I use a combination of whey and collagen protein. Collagen got really popular and still is very popular. There's been some pretty good studies done on it showing that maybe it's not having as big of an impact as we'd like, but I noticed a big change after using collagen powder. My joints felt a lot better. My guts felt better, and so I'm sticking with it. But I use about 20 grams of whey and 20 grams of collagen protein every day. I have a shake every day. For a long time, I was 2 because I just didn't want to cook. But I figured out my cooking. And so now I've got 1, and I love it. Okay, let me get a drink here. I'm going to read my final thought for you. Powders are great to supplement your protein needs with. I've used them for nearly 30 years, along with millions of others. They are not only safe, but hugely beneficial in the maintenance and building of muscle tissue, which is one of the most important factors in your fitness, health, and longevity throughout your life. That's my statement on protein powders. Okay, next episode is going to be most likely an interview with my friend, Jeremy Philo. Thought about it a half a dozen times. We had a brief little conversation in class one day, and we thought of a way that we could make it work and decided to pull the trigger on it. Plan on having him on next week. We're going to basically do a nutrition consultation. He's been wanting to get his nutrition in line. And so what I'm going to do is take him through a consultation. He'll be able to ask me questions. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions. And we're going to help him set up a plan right in front of you guys. I think it'll be a good time. Hopefully we don't crack too many jokes and get sidetracked, which is a strong possibility because he's a funny dude. Hopefully that's not too much pressure, Jeremy. But anyways, that's the plan for next week, guys. Hopefully you tune in. I really enjoy the interviews. It's way more entertaining for me to sit here and have somebody to talk to instead of just the glass eye that's staring at me with the red dot. But anyways, that's the dealio. As always, please submit your questions to Dennis@DennisVenrich.com. And please, if you know anybody that could use this information from this episode, they're wondering about protein, they're wondering about protein powders, go ahead and share it with them. Help us grow, guys. We're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and we appreciate the help. Have a great week, and we will talk to you in 7 days. Bye.